Maya knew she was about to make a terrible mistake. She could feel it in the weight of her too-thin wallet, in the overdue rent notice burning a hole in her purse, in the way her supervisor's eyes were already narrowing in warning across the gleaming marble floor of Luminaire's luxury department store. The man standing at the counter, worn jeans, faded t-shirt, scuffed work boots, was being dismissed like trash. And every survival instinct Maya had honed over 6 years of single motherhood was screaming at her to look away, to let it happen, to keep her head down and her job secure. But she'd never been good at looking away. "I'm sorry, sir, but I think you're confused about where you are," Trevor, the floor supervisor, was saying in that particular tone of condescension that made Maya's jaw clench. His voice carried across the atrium, deliberately loud enough for other customers to hear. "This is Luminaire. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at one of the discount retailers in the strip mall." The man, tall, dark-haired, with an angular face that would have been handsome if it wasn't currently tight with frustration, held up a sleek black credit card. "I have an appointment with your personal shopping service. The confirmation email. I'm sure there's been some mistake." Trevor's smile was all teeth and no warmth. He turned to a passing sales associate. "Jessica, please show this gentleman to the exit." Maya's hands were already moving, smoothing down the charcoal pencil skirt she'd worn 3 days in a row, because it was the only one without a stain Chloe's breakfast hadn't left a mark on. Her heels clicked against the marble as she crossed the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Chloe needs new shoes. The rent is due in 5 days. You cannot afford to lose this job." But the man's shoulders had gone rigid with that particular kind of hurt that comes from being invisible, from being dismissed. And Maya remembered every time she'd stood in a government office with her infant daughter, every time a landlord had looked at her application and seen only risk, every time someone had made her feel small for simply existing while poor. "Mr. Blackwood?" She stepped between Trevor and the stranger, her professional smile firmly in place even as she felt Trevor's glare burning into the back of her head. "I'm so sorry for the confusion. Your appointment is absolutely confirmed." She extended her hand to the man, holding his startled gaze. "I'm Maya Chen, the assistant manager. It would be my pleasure to personally assist you with your shopping today." Up close, his eyes were a striking gray-green, like a storm rolling over the ocean. For a moment, he just stared at her, something unreadable flickering across his face. "Maya." Trevor's voice was a warning shot. She didn't turn around, didn't break eye contact with the stranger. "Welcome to Luminaire, Mr. Blackwood. I understand you're looking for a complete wardrobe refresh?" The man's lips twitched, almost but not quite a smile. Yes, that's right." "Wonderful. If you'll follow me, I'll take you to our private consultation suite." She gestured toward the elevator bank, her hand steady even though her pulse was racing. As she turned, she caught Trevor's expression, fury mixed with something darker, something victorious, and knew with absolute certainty that she'd just signed her own pink slip. But the stranger was following her, and he was being treated with the dignity every human being deserved. And if that cost Maya everything, then at least she'd be able to look her daughter in the eye tonight and know she'd done the right thing, even if the right thing left them homeless. Julian Thorne had been dismissed, patronized, and underestimated by some of the most powerful people in international business. He'd faced down hostile corporate raiders, navigated Byzantine regulatory systems, and once convinced a room full of skeptical board members to back a $10 billion gamble on renewable energy. None of it had prepared him for Maya Chen. He followed her into the elevator, studying the rigid set of her shoulders, the way her fingers trembled slightly as she pressed the button for the 3rd floor. She was what? Late 20s? Early 30s? Pretty in an understated way that his world would probably overlook. Warm brown eyes, black hair pulled into a practical ponytail, a dusting of freckles across her nose that suggested she didn't have time or money for expensive skincare. The kind of pretty that came from the inside out, from character and kindness and a spine of absolute steel. She'd just committed career suicide for him. For a stranger in ratty jeans she thought was nobody. The elevator doors slid shut, cocooning them in silence. Julian opened his mouth to tell her the truth, that he was Julian Thorne, that he owned the corporation that owned this store and 47 others like it. That this whole degrading exercise had been a test to see how his employees treated people without power or money, that she'd just passed with flying colors while her supervisor had failed spectacularly. But before he could speak, she turned to him, and her eyes were blazing. "I'm sorry about that, Mr. Blackwood. There's no excuse for how you were treated." Her voice was steady, professional, but he heard the tremor underneath. Every customer who walks through our doors deserves respect and excellent service, regardless of their appearance or perceived budget. That's the Luminaire promise, and I'm truly sorry we failed to deliver it today. She believed it. Every word. This wasn't corporate speak or performative kindness. She meant it. Julian felt something crack open in his chest, some frozen thing he hadn't even known was there. "You didn't fail," he said quietly. "You're the only person who didn't." She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. Then the elevator chimed, the doors opened, and she was back in professional mode, leading him down a plushly carpeted hallway toward a private consultation suite that probably cost more per square foot than her monthly rent. Julian had spent 3 months planning this. He'd had his head of security create the fake identity, the fake appointment, the whole elaborate test. He'd been doing these undercover visits to different company properties for weeks, documenting the culture rot that had infected his late father's empire. Watching employee after employee prove that without the Thorne name and the Thorne money, he was invisible, disposable. He'd thought he was immune to it by now. Thought he'd learned not to hope that anyone would surprise him. But Maya Chen, with her worn shoes and her fierce principles and her trembling hands, had just shattered every cynical defense he'd built. She'd looked at a nobody and seen a person. She'd risked everything for a stranger. And now, because of his test, because of his need to expose the truth, she was going to lose her job. The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "Mr. Blackwood?" She'd stopped at the door to the consultation suite, was looking back at him with those warm, worried eyes. "Are you all right?" No. He wasn't all right. He'd just ruined the life of possibly the only genuinely good person in his entire company, and she was asking if he was all right. "I'm fine," he lied. "Just thank you for your kindness." Her smile was soft, real. "It's not kindness. It's just being human." She opened the door, ushered him into a room of cream leather and soft lighting, and Julian followed, his carefully planned test suddenly feeling like the cruelest thing he'd ever done. The consultation lasted an hour. Maya pulled pieces from 3 different departments, listening carefully to Mr. Blackwood's needs. "Professional wardrobe," he said, "something more polished for client meetings." And trying not to think about the fact that Trevor was probably already in HR, drafting her termination papers. Mr. Blackwood was an easy client. Quiet, thoughtful, with the kind of natural lean build that made everything look good. He tried on suits without complaint, offered opinions when asked, and caught her eye in the mirror more than once with an expression she couldn't quite read. When she rang up the sale, $8,000 in suits, shirts, and accessories that he'd paid for without flinching, he hesitated at the counter. "Can I ask you something?" Maya's customer service smile was beginning to hurt her face. "Of course." "Why did you help me?" You knew your supervisor was angry. Because I've been you, she wanted to say. Because I know what it feels like to be invisible. Because my daughter is going to grow up in a world full of Trevors, and I want her to be a Maya instead. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, she said simply. He studied her for a long moment, something like pain crossing his face. Then he picked up his bags and walked to the elevator. Maya watched him go and tried to calculate how many days she could stretch her savings before eviction. 3 weeks, maybe 4 if she sold her laptop. She turned around and came face to face with Trevor. My office, now. Julian sat in the back of his town car, 3 blocks from Luminaire, and watched the security footage on his tablet. He'd had cameras installed in every corner of the store as part of his operational audit. Now he watched Maya Chen walk into her supervisor's office, shoulders squared, chin high. Watched Trevor Blackwood. No relation to Julian's fake identity, unfortunate coincidence, gesture angrily, his face red. Watched Maya stand there and take it, not arguing, not defending herself, just accepting it with a dignity that made Julian's chest ache. Watched her hand over her name badge and walk out of the office. Watched her stop in the locker room, sit down on a bench, and impress her hands over her face for exactly 30 seconds before she stood up, collected her purse, and walked out of the store with her head high. Sir? His driver, Marcus, was watching him in the rearview mirror. Are we heading back to the office? Julian made a decision. No. Follow her. I need to know where she lives. Marcus, who'd been with Julian long enough to not ask questions, pulled smoothly into traffic. Julian opened his phone and called his head of HR. Susan, I need you to run a full background check on Maya Chen, assistant manager at the 5th Avenue Luminaire location, and prepare a contract for a personal assistant position. Salary, $300,000 annually, plus full benefits and housing stipend. Personal assistant. Susan sounded skeptical. Julian, you have 5 assistants. Not like her? I don't. He watched the small figure in the charcoal skirt hurry down the subway steps. And Susan? I want Trevor Blackwood terminated immediately. Send security to escort him out today. On what grounds? Julian's voice went cold. Discrimination, hostile work environment, and violation of company values. I have it all on video. He's done. He hung up and stared at the tablet screen, at the frozen image of Maya's face as she'd stepped between him and Trevor. Professional smile in place, about to sacrifice everything for a stranger in worn jeans. He was going to fix this. He was going to give her back everything his test had taken from her and more. And if some small, hidden part of him wanted another chance to see those warm brown eyes look at him with that fierce, protective kindness, well, that was just a side benefit. 7 days. Maya had been unemployed for 7 days, and the world was ending in slow motion. Day 1, telling Chloe that Mommy was taking a little break from work and watching her 6-year-old daughter's face light up because maybe that meant more time for park visits. Day 2, calling every store in a 50-mile radius. No one was hiring managers. No one wanted to touch someone terminated from Luminaire. Day 3, the eviction notice. 30 days to come up with 2 months back rent plus late fees. $4,000 she didn't have. Day 4, pawning her grandmother's pearl earrings. They brought $300. Not enough. Day 5, Chloe's school called. She needed new shoes. The soles had worn through. Maya bought the cheapest pair at Payless and watched her daughter pretend they didn't pinch. Day 6, applying for retail positions that paid half what she'd been making. Nobody called back. Day 7, the phone call. Ms. Chen, this is Susan Park from Thorne Enterprises. We'd like to invite you to interview for a personal assistant position. The compensation is $300,000 annually, plus benefits. Would you be available tomorrow at 2? Maya had said yes, before her brain had fully processed the words. Then she'd hung up and Googled Thorn Enterprises, and nearly dropped her phone. Thorn Enterprises, as in Julian Thorn, the billionaire CEO, as in the corporation that owned Luminaire and half the high-end retail properties in the country, as in the man whose net worth was estimated at $12 billion. Why would Julian Thorn want to interview her? Now, standing outside the gleaming glass tower that housed the Thorn Enterprises headquarters, Maya smoothed down the same charcoal skirt she'd worn to her execution and tried to remember how to breathe. The lobby was all marble and chrome, and a waterfall that probably cost more than her annual salary. The receptionist directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. The elevator didn't have buttons. It just went up and up and up, until Maya's ears popped and her stomach was somewhere around the 40th floor. The doors opened directly into a penthouse. Not an office, a home. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Central Park. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors. Original artwork on the walls. Maya recognized a Rothko, or at least she thought she did. A kitchen with marble countertops and appliances that looked like they'd never been used. And standing by the windows, backlit by the afternoon sun, was Mr. Blackwood. Except he wasn't Mr. Blackwood anymore. He was wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car had been worth. His dark hair was styled instead of deliberately messy. His scuffed work boots had been replaced by Italian leather shoes. He was clean-shaven, polished, and holding a glass of scotch like he was born to it. He turned. Those storm-gray eyes met hers. "Hello, Maya." The world tilted. She knew that voice, knew those eyes. But her brain couldn't reconcile Mr. Blackwood, the customer she'd tried to help, with the man standing in front of her now. "I don't understand," she whispered. He set down his glass and walked toward her, each step measured and deliberate. "My name is Julian Thorn. I own Thorn Enterprises, which includes Luminaire, and I owe you an explanation and an apology." The floor wasn't steady anymore. Maya's fingers found the back of a nearby chair, gripping it to keep herself upright. You were testing us." "Yes." No hesitation, no excuses. "I've been conducting undercover evaluations of our company culture, going into our properties as someone without money or power to see how employees treat people they think are beneath them." Fury ignited in Maya's chest, hot and bright and overwhelming. "You cost me my job." Her voice shook. "You came into my store, you made me choose between my principles and my paycheck, and it was all a test?" "Yes." He didn't look away, didn't flinch. "And you passed. You were the only one who did. You treated me, a stranger you thought had nothing, with dignity and respect. You put your livelihood on the line for someone you believed couldn't do anything for you in return. So this is what?" Bitterness coated every word. "My reward? You swoop in with a job offer and I'm supposed to be grateful that you're fixing the problem you created? No." He moved closer, and she could see the regret in his eyes now, raw and real. "You're supposed to be angry, furious. You should throw that glass at my head and walk out of here, and I wouldn't blame you." He paused. "But before you do, let me make you an offer." She was magnificent. Standing in his penthouse with fire in her eyes and her hands shaking with rage, Maya Chen was the most magnificent thing Julian had ever seen. She wasn't intimidated by his money or his power or his apology. She was livid, and she had every right to be. He'd spent 7 days watching her spiral through his security reports and background check. Watched her call every potential employer, watched her savings dwindle, watched her sell jewelry that clearly meant something to her. And with every day, his guilt had grown heavier, more suffocating. He couldn't undo what he'd done, but he could give her something that might make it worth the cost. "I need an assistant," he said quietly, "but not the kind I have. I have 5 people who manage my calendar, handle my correspondence, coordinate my meetings. They're all excellent at their jobs. But they all tell me what I want to hear. They see Julian Thorne, Billionaire CEO, and they perform for me. I never know if I'm getting honesty or strategy." Maya's grip on the chair tightened. "And you think I'll be honest with you, after what you did? I think you'll be honest with me because of what I did." He moved to the window, giving her space, giving himself a moment to find the right words. "You proved you can't be bought. You lost everything rather than compromise your principles. That's exactly who I need beside me. Beside you. Advising me, challenging me, helping me understand what's really happening in my company instead of the sanitized version everyone else feeds me." He turned back to face her. $300,000 a year. Full benefits including health, dental, and vision for you and your daughter. Housing stipend, company car, flexible hours so you can be there for your daughter, and a direct line to the CEO, me, anytime you see something that goes against your principles. He watched her process it. Watched the anger war with the desperation, the pride battle with the practicality. "Why?" Her voice was barely audible. "Why me?" "Because in a sea of people who see my money and my power, you saw a person being mistreated and stood up for him. Because you're the only person in my entire company who chose kindness over security. Because I don't trust anyone else to tell me the truth." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at him with those penetrating brown eyes. Then, "What's the catch?" "Smart." Of course she was smart. "The catch is that I'm going to put you in difficult positions. I'm going to ask you to evaluate people, to tell me hard truths, to be my conscience when I'm making decisions that affect thousands of employees. You won't be answering phones or fetching coffee. You'll be my partner in rebuilding this company's culture from the inside out." "Your partner?" She said it like she was testing the weight of the word. "But you'll still be the billionaire CEO, and I'll still be the assistant." "Yes. And everyone will think I'm sleeping with you to keep my job." The bluntness hit him like a slap. But she was right. Of course she was right. Probably. She laughed, short and bitter. "At least you're honest now." Julian moved back toward her, slowly, like approaching a wounded animal. "I can't change what people think. But I can give you a contract that makes your position unassailable. Your job security won't depend on my goodwill. It will be guaranteed in writing, with a severance package that means you'll never have to worry about money again. Even if you walk away tomorrow." He was close enough now to see the exhaustion in her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the way her suit was just slightly too loose because she'd been skipping meals to stretch her grocery budget. "I can't undo what my test cost you," he said softly. "But I can give you the power to make sure it never happens to anyone else. I can give you a voice in a company that desperately needs to hear it. And I can pay you enough that you never have to choose between your principles and your daughter's security again." She stared at him for a long moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and lifted her chin, and Julian saw the exact moment she made her decision. She should walk away. Every instinct screamed at her to tell Julian Thorne exactly where he could shove his job offer and his guilt money. He'd played with her life like it was a game. He'd cost her everything to prove a point. But Chloe needed new shoes and winter coats, and the rent was due in 3 weeks, and Maya had $847 in her bank account. And, though she hated to admit it, He wasn't wrong. $300,000 a year meant security, not just surviving, but actually living. It meant Chloe could take dance classes instead of watching YouTube videos in their apartment. It meant Maya could stop choosing between electricity and groceries. It meant power. The power to never be helpless again. "I have conditions," she said, her voice steady. Something flickered in his eyes. Relief. "Name them." "This is a transaction. You're paying for my honesty and my work, not for anything else." She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "My personal life and my daughter are off limits. You don't get access to them just because you're signing my paychecks." "Agreed. I report to you, but I'm not your property. If I see something unethical, I'm going to call it out, even if it's something you're doing. Even if it costs me this job. That's exactly what I'm hiring you for. And if you ever test me like that again, if you play games with my livelihood or my daughter's security, I'm gone. No notice, no explanation. You'll just wake up one day and I won't be here." Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. "Because I'm accepting this position from a place of strength, not desperation. I'm choosing to work with you because I believe I can make a difference. But I'm not choosing you over myself or my daughter. Clear?" Julian's expression was unreadable. Then, slowly, he smiled. It transformed his face, softened the harsh angles, reached his eyes. Crystal clear. He extended his hand. "Partners?" Maya looked at his hand, thought about Chloe's worn-through shoes and the eviction notice and 7 days of falling through the cracks. Thought about the power to change things, to be the voice for every employee who'd ever been dismissed or overlooked. Thought about the fact that Julian Thorne, in his bespoke suit and his guilt-ridden eyes, was still the same man who'd looked genuinely hurt when Trevor had treated him like trash. That maybe, underneath the billions and the manipulation, there was something real. She took his hand. "Partners." His grip was warm and firm, and something electric passed between them at the contact. Maya pulled her hand back quickly, professional distance snapping into place. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow." He was still smiling, and it was doing dangerous things to her pulse. "I'll have Susan send over the contract tonight. Read it with a lawyer if you want. Make sure you're protected." "I will." She turned toward the elevator, then paused. "Mr. Thorne?" "Julian," he corrected gently. "Julian." The name felt strange on her tongue, intimate. "Thank you for firing Trevor. He shouldn't have been in a position of power over anyone." "He won't be." Julian's voice went cold. "And Maya? Anyone else in the company who treats employees the way he did? I need you to tell me. That's the real job. Finding the rot and cutting it out." She nodded and stepped into the elevator. As the doors began to close, she caught one last glimpse of him standing in his pristine penthouse. Backlit by his billion-dollar view, looking somehow lonelier than Mr. Blackwood in his ratty jeans had ever looked. The elevator descended, and Maya leaned against the wall, letting herself breathe for the first time in 7 days. She'd just made a deal with a devil in designer clothes. She could only hope they'd both survive it. 3 weeks later, Maya had learned several important things about Julian Thorne. 1. He worked 18-hour days and expected everyone around him to do the same. 2. He ate lunch at his desk, usually something ordered in and forgotten until it was cold, and considered coffee a food group. 3. He was brilliant, ruthless in negotiations, and had a mind that moved 3 steps ahead of everyone else in every meeting. 4. He listened when she talked. That last one was the most dangerous. It was 8:30 on a Friday night. Maya should have been home hours ago, should have been giving Chloe dinner and helping with homework and reading bedtime stories. Instead, she was in Julian's penthouse office. He'd moved her workspace up here after the first week, said he needed her close for quick consultations, reviewing employee satisfaction surveys from the retail division, and trying not to fall asleep over her laptop. Maya. She jerked her head up. Julian was standing in the doorway, jacket off, tie loosened, looking as exhausted as she felt. You should go home. I need to finish these surveys. The pattern analysis can wait until Monday. He walked into the room, picked up her laptop, and closed it despite her protest. Your daughter needs you more than I need those reports. The mention of Chloe sent a pang through her chest. She'd missed bedtime 3 nights this week. Mrs. Rodriguez, their neighbor, had been doing pickup from after-school care, and Maya was paying her extra. And Chloe said she didn't mind, but Maya minded. She'd taken this job to give her daughter a better life, not to become an absent mother. I'm sorry. The words came out thick. I want to do this job well. I want to prove that you didn't make a mistake. Julian set the laptop aside and sat down in the chair across from her, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. Maya, in 3 weeks, you've identified 12 managers who were creating hostile work environments, restructured our HR complaint process, and personally intervened in 4 situations that would have become lawsuits. You've already proven yourself 10 times over. Then why do I still feel like I'm one mistake away from losing everything? The vulnerability escaped before she could stop it. She pressed her hands over her face, mortified. This wasn't professional. This wasn't the strong, unshakable partner she'd promised to be. Because that's what poverty does. Julian's voice was soft. It makes you believe you're always one misstep from disaster, even when you're not. Even when you're safe. She looked up at him through her fingers. How would you know? My father built this company from nothing. I grew up watching him work 80-hour weeks, terrified that one wrong decision would cost us everything. He smiled, but it was sad. Even after we made our first $1 billion, he still brought home day-old bread from the discount bakery. Couldn't break the habit. Maya lowered her hands. I didn't know that. Most people don't. They see the money now and assume it was always there. He stood up, moved to his desk, and poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher. He brought one back to her. But I remember what it was like to be afraid. And I remember what it cost my father to never stop being afraid. Even when he didn't need to be anymore. She took the glass, her fingers brushing his. That electric spark again, the one she'd felt the day they shook hands. She pulled back quickly and took a sip, using it as an excuse to look away. Tell me about Chloe, Julian said, settling back into his chair. You never talk about her. That was one of my conditions. Personal life stays personal. I'm not asking as your boss. His eyes were intent on her face. I'm asking as someone who wants to know what makes you smile. It was dangerous territory. Maya knew it. But she was tired and lonely, and she'd spent 3 weeks in this sterile penthouse with its expensive art and its soulless furniture. And Julian was looking at her like she was a person, not an employee. She's 6, Maya heard herself saying. She wants to be a paleontologist this week. Last week it was an astronaut. She's obsessed with dinosaurs and space and anything that's bigger than she is. A real smile tugged at her lips. She has this thing where she narrates her own life like she's a nature documentary. And here we see the rare and elusive Chloe Chen approaching the kitchen in search of snacks. Julian laughed. A real laugh, surprised and genuine. She sounds remarkable. She is. Maya's chest ached with love and guilt in equal measure. She's the best thing I've ever done, the only thing I've done right. I doubt that's true. You didn't see me at 23, pregnant and terrified, and watching her father walk out before she was even born. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. I've made 1,000 mistakes. But somehow, she's turning out perfect anyway. She was crying, not sobbing, just a slow leak of exhausted tears that she kept trying to wipe away with the back of her hand, looking mortified and furious with herself for the display of weakness. Julian's heart cracked open. He'd seen Maya strong, seen her defiant, seen her professional and polished and unshakable. He'd never seen her like this, vulnerable and human, and so beautifully, painfully real that it hurt to look at her. He stood up and moved to the couch, giving her space but staying close. Maya, I'm fine. I'm sorry. This is so unprofessional. Stop. He kept his voice gentle. You're exhausted. You've been working yourself to death for 3 weeks, trying to prove you belong here. And you just told me about the most important person in your life. That's not unprofessional. That's human. She laughed through her tears, the sound broken. You're paying me $300,000 to be your conscience, and here I am, having a breakdown in your office. You're not having a breakdown? You're just... He trailed off, searching for words. You're just being real for a minute. It's refreshing. She looked up at him, and her eyes were so warm, so full of exhaustion and love and fierce maternal devotion that Julian felt something shift in his chest. Something he'd kept locked down for so long he'd almost forgotten it existed. Want. Not the casual, transactional want he'd felt for other women, the ones who saw his money first and him second. This was different. This was want that came from seeing who someone really was and being drawn to every sharp edge and soft vulnerability. He reached out without thinking, brushing a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The contact was electric. Maya froze, her breath catching. Julian's hand lingered, his thumb tracing the curve of her cheekbone, feeling the warmth of her skin and the flutter of her pulse. Her eyes were wide, startled, and something else. Something that looked like the same want that was currently setting fire to his careful control. Julian. Her voice was barely a whisper. He leaned closer. He could smell her shampoo, something clean and simple, not the expensive perfumes of his usual world. Could see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Could feel the heat radiating from her body. Maya. He said her name like a question, like a prayer. Her eyes dropped to his mouth. Her lips parted slightly. The air between them was charged, crackling with possibility and danger, and 3 weeks of suppressed attraction that had been building since the moment she'd stepped between him and Trevor. He could kiss her. She wanted him to kiss her. He could see it in the way she was leaning toward him, in the way her breathing had gone shallow, in the way her fingers had curled into the fabric of her skirt. One kiss, one moment of giving in to this thing between them. Kiss me. The thought was so loud, so consuming, that Maya was terrified she'd said it out loud. Julian was inches away, his hand warm against her face, his eyes dark with desire that mirrored her own. She could feel the heat of him, smell his cologne mixed with coffee and the faint scent of his skin. She wanted to close the distance, wanted to find out if his mouth was as clever at kissing as it was at negotiations, wanted to let herself have this one reckless, dangerous thing. But reality crashed back in like cold water. He was her boss, her billionaire boss, the man who signed her paychecks, who controlled her daughter's security, who could destroy her life with a word. The man who'd already manipulated her once. If she kissed him now, everything changed. The partnership became a lie. The job became conditional. She became just another assistant who'd slept with the boss, and every achievement would be tainted with the assumption that she'd earned it on her back instead of her merit. And Chloe. God. Chloe deserved a mother who was strong enough to resist. who chose her daughter's stability over her own desires. Maya pulled back sharply, breaking the contact. Her hand came up to push against Julian's chest, creating distance. This isn't part of the job description. Her voice shook, but the words were firm. Julian froze. Then slowly, he withdrew his hand and sat back, putting space between them. You're right. I'm sorry. Don't. She stood up, needing more distance, needing air. Don't apologize. Just don't do that again. Maya. I need this job, Julian. I need it to be real. I need to know that when I tell you hard truths, you're listening because I'm right, not because you want to sleep with me. She grabbed her laptop, her purse, all the physical markers of professionalism. I need the power dynamic to stay clear. Boss and employee, partner in business, nothing else. He stood too, his expression unreadable. Is that what you want? Or what you think you need? The question hit too close to home, because the truth was, Maya didn't know. She knew what she should want: professional distance, clear boundaries, safety. But in that moment when his hand had been on her face, she'd wanted something else entirely. It doesn't matter what I want, she said quietly. It matters what's right. And this, she gestured between them. At the charged air and the unfinished almost kiss, this isn't right. Not when you have all the power. You have power too. Julian's voice was intense. You have the power to walk away. You have it in writing. I can't touch you without your consent. But I'll always wonder. The admission hurt. If things go well, I'll wonder if it's because I'm good at my job or because you want me. If they go badly, I'll wonder if it's because I rejected you. That doubt will poison everything. She moved to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened immediately. Maya. Julian's voice stopped her at the threshold. For what it's worth, it was never a test this time. And you are brilliant at your job. The best decision I've made in 5 years was hiring you. She looked back at him. Standing alone in his pristine penthouse with his billion-dollar view, and saw the loneliness in his eyes. The same loneliness she felt in her own cramped apartment when Chloe was asleep and the walls pressed in too close. Good night, Julian. The elevator doors closed on his face, and Maya slumped against the wall, her heart hammering. She'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like she'd just walked away from something that mattered? Julian stood in his empty penthouse for a long time after Maya left, his hand still tingling from where it had touched her face. He'd almost kissed her. Worse, he'd almost kissed her, and she'd wanted him to. Right up until the moment reality had crashed back in and reminded her that he held all the power. She was right. Of course she was right. She was always right. Which was exactly why he'd hired her and exactly why this was so complicated. But God, the way she'd looked at him in that moment, the way she'd leaned in, her eyes dropping to his mouth, her breath catching, the way she'd wanted him, not because he was Julian Thorne, but because she saw him. He walked to the window, pressed his forehead against the cool glass, and stared out at the glittering city below. Somewhere down there, Maya was on the subway heading home to her daughter, probably berating herself for almost kissing her boss, probably reinforcing every wall she'd built between them. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. Background check on Trevor Blackwood revealed 2 previous sexual harassment complaints, both settled with NDAs. Thought you should know. Julian closed his eyes. He'd thought he was so clever, going undercover to expose the truth. But he'd just scratched the surface. The rot went deeper than he'd imagined. And Maya, fierce, principled Maya, was his best hope of cutting it all out. If he didn't destroy this fragile partnership first by wanting things he had no right to want. He texted back, forward me everything, and increase Maya Chen's security clearance. I want her to have access to all HR files, all complaint records, everything. No restrictions. Then he poured himself 3 fingers of scotch, sat down in the spot where Maya had been crying, and tried not to think about how her skin had felt under his thumb. Tried not to think about how, for one brief, shining moment, he'd felt less alone. Tried not to think about how much harder it was going to be to work beside her now, knowing exactly how much he wanted what he couldn't have. The penthouse was silent, except for the city sounds far below. Julian drank his scotch and accepted the truth. He'd hired Maya Chen to help him find his company's heart. He just hadn't expected her to steal his in the process. 6 weeks into the job, and Maya had developed a system. Professional distance during business hours, polite but cool in meetings. No more late nights alone in the penthouse. No more personal conversations that strayed too close to the truth. She arrived at 9, left at 5:30, and kept every interaction with Julian Thorne strictly transactional. It was killing her. Not because she missed the almost kiss, though she did, in the treacherous hours before sleep when her defenses were down, but because the work mattered. She'd uncovered a pattern of systematic discrimination in the hiring practices of 3 regional divisions. She'd identified managers who were retaliating against employees who filed complaints. She'd personally intervened in situations where women were being pressured out of leadership positions. And every time she brought evidence to Julian, he listened, he acted. He burned down the old systems and built new ones, and he did it because she'd shown him the truth. But the 5:30 boundary meant she was only seeing half the picture. The real work happened after hours, in the strategy sessions and the high-level meetings where decisions were made. And Maya was missing it because she was too afraid of what might happen if she stayed. Now, standing in Julian's office at 4:45 on a Friday, she was about to break her own rule. There's a storm coming. Julian was standing by the window, watching dark clouds roll in over the city. A bad one. They're saying it'll hit around 6. Maya glanced at her phone. Mrs. Rodriguez had Chloe until 6:30, but the trains would be a nightmare if she waited much longer. I should go. Let me drive you. She looked up sharply. What? Let me drive you home. It's Friday, the trains will be packed, and you'll be stuck underground when the storm hits. He turned from the window, his expression carefully neutral. It's just a ride, Maya, not a proposition. She should say no, should maintain the boundary, should take the subway like she had every other day for 6 weeks. But the clouds outside were black and menacing, and she was so tired of being soaked to the skin by the time she got home. And Chloe always worried when there were storms. Just a ride, she said. Just a ride, Julian confirmed. The drive took 40 minutes instead of the usual 20. Traffic was snarled, rain hammering the roof of the town car like bullets. Marcus navigated with calm efficiency, while Julian sat in the back seat beside Maya, maintaining a careful foot of distance between them. She was tense, staring out the window at the gray city, her fingers worrying the strap of her purse. Julian wanted to ask what she was thinking, wanted to bridge the chasm that had opened between them since that night in his penthouse. But he'd promised himself he wouldn't push. She'd set a boundary. He would respect it, even if it cost him the easy partnership they'd been building. Turn left here, Maya said suddenly, and Marcus smoothly changed lanes. They were in a neighborhood Julian didn't know. Not dangerous exactly, but worn down. Older buildings with fire escapes and cracked sidewalks, laundromats and bodegas with bars on the windows. A world away from his penthouse and his polished life. Here, Maya said, and Marcus pulled up in front of a 6-story walk-up with faded brick and a door that looked like it had been kicked in and repaired more than once. Julian looked at the building and felt his chest tighten. This was where she lived, where she came home every night after working in his pristine office, where she raised her daughter. It wasn't a slum, but it was a far cry from the life his money could provide. Thank you for the ride. Maya was already reaching for the door handle. Maya, wait. The words came out before he could stop them. Let me walk you up. Make sure you get inside safely. I've been getting inside safely for 6 years. Humor me. She looked at him for a long moment. Rain streaming down the windows, the car a warm cocoon in the storm. Then she sighed. Fine, but you're not coming in. I wouldn't dream of it. They got out of the car, and the rain immediately soaked through Julian's suit. Maya had an umbrella, but it was a cheap one that kept inverting in the wind. He took it from her, held it over both of them, and followed her up the cracked steps to the building entrance. She unlocked 3 separate locks, deadbolt, chain, regular lock, and pushed open the door to reveal a narrow stairwell with flickering fluorescent lights. The smell hit him immediately. Cooking spices, old building, humanity living in close quarters. 3rd floor, Maya said, already climbing. Julian followed, noting the graffiti on the walls, the missing banister on the 2nd floor landing, the way she automatically stepped over the 3rd step from the top because it sagged under her weight. By the time they reached her door, 3C, with a cheerful handmade wreath that said, "Welcome," in a child's handwriting. Julian was furious. Not at Maya, at himself, at a system that paid her a fraction of what she was worth and made her live like this. At the fact that he'd given her $300,000 a year and she was still here because rental agreements couldn't be broken and security deposits couldn't be recovered and poverty had claws that didn't let go easily. Maya was unlocking her door. 2 more locks, he counted, when it flew open from the inside. "Mommy!" A tiny figure launched itself at Maya's legs. Dark hair and messy pigtails, missing front tooth, wearing a dinosaur t-shirt and light-up sneakers. Chloe Chen, in all her 6-year-old glory. "Hey, baby!" Maya scooped her up, all the tension draining from her body. She was transformed. Not the cool professional or the guarded employee, but just a mother, radiant with love. "Did you have a good day?" "We learned about the Cretaceous period, and Mrs. Rodriguez made empanadas, and I drew you a picture of a T-Rex eating a lawyer like in Jurassic Park, except I made him eat a nice lawyer so it's not too scary and—" Chloe stopped mid-sentence, her eyes going wide as she spotted Julian. "Who are you?" Julian found himself kneeling automatically, getting down to her level the way his father had taught him when meeting new people. "I'm Julian. I work with your mom." Chloe studied him with the serious intensity of children everywhere. "Are you the reason Mommy's been sad?" "Chloe!" Maya's voice was sharp with mortification, but Julian kept his eyes on the little girl. "Maybe. I hope not. Has she been sad?" "She cries in the bathroom sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep. But she doesn't know I can hear because the walls are thin." Chloe said it matter-of-factly, without accusation, just stating truth. "Are you going to make her not sad?" The question hit Julian like a physical blow. He looked up at Maya, saw the tears shimmering in her eyes, the exhaustion she'd been hiding so well behind her professional mask. "I'm going to try," he said softly. She was going to kill her daughter, or die of mortification, one or the other. "Chloe, that's not appropriate," Maya started, but Mrs. Rodriguez was already bustling over from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. "Mija, you're soaked, and you brought a friend?" The older woman's eyes went sharp and assessing as she took in Julian's expensive suit and his carefully polished exterior. "Maya, you didn't tell me. He's my boss, Mrs. Rodriguez. He just gave me a ride home because of the storm." "Your boss." Mrs. Rodriguez's tone suggested she didn't believe that for a second. Well, he has good manners at least, getting down to talk to Chloe properly. She patted Julian's shoulder like he was one of her grandchildren. You stay for dinner. I made too much and Maya never eats enough. Oh no, I couldn't, Julian started. I insist. You can't drive back in this storm anyway. Look. She gestured to the window, where rain was coming down in sheets. You'll die in an accident, and then Maya will feel guilty forever. Sit, eat, we have plenty. Maya wanted to protest, wanted to maintain the boundary, wanted to keep this world, her real world, separate from Julian and his billions. But Chloe had already grabbed Julian's hand and was pulling him toward the tiny kitchen table, and Mrs. Rodriguez was plating empanadas, and the apartment was warm and full of the smell of good food and the sound of her daughter's chatter. And Julian was letting himself be pulled along, was sitting in the rickety chair that wobbled, was accepting a plate of food with genuine gratitude, was listening to Chloe explain the difference between Cretaceous and Jurassic dinosaurs, with the same focused attention he gave board meetings. Maya sank into the chair across from him and watched her carefully constructed walls crumble. This was what a home felt like. Julian sat at Maya's kitchen table. Scarred wood, mismatched chairs, one leg propped up with a folded piece of cardboard, and felt something in his chest unfold that he hadn't even known was clenched tight. The apartment was tiny. One bedroom, he assumed, which meant Maya probably slept on the couch. The furniture was old but clean, everything worn but well maintained. Children's drawings covered the refrigerator. Books were stacked everywhere. Library books, Julian noted, not new purchases. A puzzle was spread out on the coffee table, half finished. It was cramped and modest and more full of life than his entire penthouse. Chloe was sitting beside him, explaining her dinosaur drawings with the kind of passionate intensity that reminded him painfully of Maya. Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd refused to leave despite the storm, insisting she lived in the building anyway, just downstairs, was plating seconds despite Julian's protests, and Maya was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read. So then the asteroid hit, and boom! Chloe threw her hands in the air, nearly knocking over her juice. All the dinosaurs died, except the ones that turned into birds. Those were smart. Very smart, Julian agreed. He took a bite of empanada and nearly groaned. It was delicious. Flaky, perfectly seasoned. The kind of homemade food he never ate. Mrs. Rodriguez, this is incredible. The older woman beamed. You come back any time. It's nice to see Maya with friends. He's not her friend. He's her boss. Chloe corrected, then frowned. Wait, can your boss be your friend? That's complicated, mija, Mrs. Rodriguez said, but her eyes were twinkling as she looked between Julian and Maya. Why is it complicated? Chloe demanded. Maya opened her mouth, but Julian spoke first. Because sometimes when someone works for you, they might not feel like they can be honest about being friends. They might worry that if the friendship goes bad, they'll lose their job. Chloe processed this with the seriousness of a Supreme Court justice. That's dumb. If you like someone, you should just tell them. You're absolutely right, Julian said, his eyes on Maya. It is dumb. Maya looked away, color rising in her cheeks. The storm raged outside. Thunder shook the windows. But inside, in this tiny apartment with its mismatched furniture and its warm kitchen and its bright-eyed little girl, Julian felt more at peace than he had in years. He watched Maya help Chloe with a dinosaur puzzle, her hands gentle and patient. Watched her laugh at one of Mrs. Rodriguez's stories, her whole face lighting up. Watched her move around her small kingdom with efficiency and grace, making the most of everything she had. She'd built this life, this home, this remarkable child. She'd done it alone, with no help and no safety net. And she'd created something beautiful. And Julian, with all his billions and all his power, couldn't remember the last time anyone had invited him to dinner just because they wanted his company. "Julian?" Chloe was tugging on his sleeve. "Do you want to see my rock collection?" He looked at Maya, asking permission. She hesitated, then nodded. "I'd love to," he said. Chloe grabbed his hand, so small, so trusting, and pulled him toward a bookshelf where an array of stones and pebbles were carefully arranged. She explained each one with scientific precision, where she'd found it, what kind it might be, why it was special. Julian crouched beside her, listening, and felt the cold CEO armor he'd worn for so long crack and split. This was what he'd been missing, not in his company, in his life. Connection, warmth, someone looking at him and seeing not a bank account or a business opportunity, but just a person. When Chloe finally wound down, exhausted by her own enthusiasm, Maya appeared in the doorway. "Bedtime, baby. Say goodnight to Mr. Thorne." "Do you have to go?" Chloe looked up at Julian with disappointed eyes. "I'm afraid so. But thank you for showing me your collection. It's very impressive." Chloe threw her arms around his waist in an impulsive hug. "You can come back and see it any time. We're here every day because we're not rich." "Chloe!" Maya's voice was strangled. But Julian just laughed and hugged the little girl back, his heart doing something complicated and painful in his chest. "I'd like that very much." After Chloe was in bed, after the teeth brushing and the story and the 3 glasses of water and the final kiss goodnight, Maya came back to the living room to find Julian standing by the window, watching the storm with an unreadable expression. Mrs. Rodriguez had finally gone downstairs. They were alone. "I'm sorry about Chloe," Maya said quietly. "She doesn't understand boundaries yet. Don't apologize." Julian turned to face her. "She's remarkable. You've raised an incredible kid, Maya." The compliment settled warm in her chest, dangerous and welcome. "She's the best thing in my life. I can see that." He moved away from the window, closer to her, but not too close, still respecting the distance she'd demanded. "Thank you for letting me stay, for letting me see this part of your life. You didn't give me much choice. Mrs. Rodriguez doesn't take no for an answer. Remind me to give her a raise." Maya laughed despite herself. "She doesn't work for you. Then remind me to give you a raise so you can give her a raise." "Julian." His name came out softer than she intended. "Why are you really here?" He was quiet for a long moment, the only sound the rain against the windows and the distant rumble of thunder. When he spoke, his voice was low and raw. "Because I've been living in a sterile box for so long, I'd forgotten what a home feels like. Because your daughter asked me a simple question about friendship, and I realized I don't have a good answer. Because—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, destroying its perfect styling. "Because I hired you to help me find my company's heart. And somehow you showed me I'd lost my own." Maya's breath caught. "Julian, I'm not trying to cross lines," he said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything you're not willing to give. I just wanted you to know that tonight, this dinner, your daughter's dinosaur collection, Mrs. Rodriguez's empanadas, this was the best evening I've had in years. Maybe ever." He moved to the door, and Maya should have let him go. Should have kept the boundary intact. Should have protected herself and her daughter from the complication of wanting things they couldn't have. But she reached out and caught his hand. "Julian, wait." He stopped, turned, his eyes dark and intense. "Thank you," she said softly, "for being kind to Chloe, for treating her like she mattered. For—" She swallowed hard. "For seeing us, the real us, not the polished version." His hand tightened around hers. "The real you is the best version." They stood there for a moment, hands clasped, the air between them charged with all the things they weren't saying. Maya was acutely aware of how close he was, how good he smelled even after hours in her cramped apartment, how much she wanted to close the distance and damn the consequences. But Chloe was sleeping in the next room, and the walls really were thin. And Maya had fought too hard to build this safe little life, to risk it on a feeling that might evaporate in the morning light. She let go of his hand, stepped back. "Good night, Julian." "Good night, Maya." She locked the 3 locks behind him and leaned against the door, listening to his footsteps fade down the stairwell. Then she went to the bathroom, turned on the shower to cover the sound, and let herself cry. Not from sadness this time, from wanting something so badly it physically hurt, and knowing she couldn't let herself have it. The car arrived on a Tuesday morning. Maya was running late. Chloe had been up half the night with a nightmare, and the coffee maker had broken, and Maya's own car had finally given up the ghost yesterday, coughing black smoke before dying in the grocery store parking lot. She'd gotten a quote for repairs, $20,800. More than the car was worth. So she'd been planning to take the subway to work, meaning leaving earlier, meaning rushing Chloe through breakfast, meaning starting the day already exhausted and behind. Then Mrs. Rodriguez knocked on the door. "Mija, there's a man downstairs with a car. Says he's here for you." Maya's first thought was that Julian had sent his driver. Her second thought was mortification. She'd asked him not to do things like that, not to make her feel like a kept woman. But when she got downstairs, it wasn't Marcus in the town car. It was a dealership representative standing beside a silver SUV. Not flashy, not a luxury brand. A safe, reliable, family-friendly Honda Pilot with excellent safety ratings and a spacious back seat. "Ms. Chen?" The man smiled and held out a key fob. "This is your company vehicle. All the paperwork is in the glove box. It's fully insured and maintained by Thorne Enterprises. If you have any issues, there's a number to call for immediate roadside assistance." Maya stared at the SUV, her throat tight. "My company vehicle?" "Yes, ma'am. According to the paperwork, valued assets to the company are provided with reliable transportation. It's part of your benefits package." He handed her the keys and a folder of documents, then walked away to a waiting sedan. Maya stood on the sidewalk, keys in hand, and opened the folder. The paperwork was real. Company vehicle, assigned to Maya Chen, personal assistant to the CEO. Fully insured, maintenance covered, no payment required. There was a note tucked inside, in Julian's handwriting. "A valued asset to the company needs reliable transportation. This is a tool for your independence, not a gift. Accept it as such. J." Julian was in a meeting with the board when his phone buzzed with a text from Maya. "Thank you for the car. It's perfect." 3 words that made him smile like an idiot in the middle of a quarterly financial review. He'd spent 3 days researching the safest family vehicles, had consulted with experts on car seats and safety ratings, had deliberately chosen something practical and modest. Nothing that would make her feel uncomfortable or indebted. She'd been taking the subway to work in designer clothes she couldn't afford to replace, coming home to her daughter exhausted and stretched too thin, and her car had been one disaster away from breakdown for months. He'd just given her one less thing to worry about. "You're welcome," he texted back. "How's Chloe?" "Better." The new car made her morning. She called it Mommy's dinosaur car because it's big. Julian's smile widened. "Tell her it can fit at least 3 full-size T-Rex skeletons in the back." "You're going to get me in trouble." Now she'll want to test that. The board was still droning on about market projections. Julian typed, "Free this evening? I want to run some ideas past you about the employee healthcare restructure." A long pause. Then, 5:30. "Your office?" "Perfect." He pocketed his phone and forced himself to focus on the presentation, but his mind was already racing ahead to the evening, to seeing Maya's face when she talked about policy changes, to the way she'd light up when he told her they were implementing her suggestions about parental leave, to the way she'd looked at him in her tiny apartment, surrounded by her real life, and said, "Thank you for seeing us." He was going to make sure she never felt invisible again. The company family picnic was Julian's idea. "I want to do something to show employees we value work-life balance," he'd said 2 weeks ago, sitting across from Maya in his office. "A weekend event, family-friendly, no pressure, just an opportunity for people to connect outside of work." Maya had thought it was a good idea, had helped plan it, in fact, coordinating with HR and choosing a location and making sure there were activities for children. Now, standing in the sprawling park with Chloe's hand in hers and Julian beside her, she was regretting every decision. Because people were staring. It was subtle. Sideways glances, whispered conversations that stopped when she got too close. The way groups of employees would fall silent as she and Julian walked past. She was here as his assistant, officially, helping him navigate the event and introduce him to employees' families. But it didn't look like that. It looked like she was his date, with her daughter in tow. Chloe was oblivious, running between the playground equipment and dragging Julian over to push her on the swings. He'd dressed down for the occasion, khakis and a polo shirt, the most casual Maya had ever seen him. And he looked heartbreakingly normal as he pushed Chloe higher, laughing at her demands to go faster. Maya stood off to the side, trying to project professional distance, and felt eyes on her from every direction. Then she heard the voice. "I see why she got rehired so quickly." Maya turned. Trevor, the supervisor who'd fired her, was here, apparently still attending company events despite his termination. He was standing 20 feet away with a group of mid-level managers, but his voice carried clearly across the grass. "Some assistants are just very good at personal service," he continued, his tone dripping with innuendo. The group around him laughed, some uncomfortably, some with genuine amusement. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. Julian heard the comment from across the playground. He'd been pushing Chloe on the swings, listening to her chatter about aerodynamics and momentum, when Trevor's voice cut through the afternoon like a knife. "Some assistants are just very good at personal service." He saw Maya freeze, saw the color leave her face, saw the way her hands clenched into fists at her sides, saw the exact moment her heart broke. Julian was moving before he fully registered the decision, leaving Chloe on the swing, crossing the grass with murder in his eyes. Trevor saw him coming and had the grace to look alarmed. "You're fired," Julian said flatly. "Security will escort you from the property immediately." "I already don't work here," Trevor started, sneering. "Then you're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll have you arrested." Julian pulled out his phone, already dialing. "Marcus, I need security at the family picnic immediately." The managers around Trevor scattered like cockroaches. Trevor's sneer faltered. "You can't. I can, and I am. You sexually harassed your employees. You created a hostile work environment, and now you're publicly defaming my personal assistant with baseless insinuations. Leave. Now." Trevor's face went red. "Everyone can see what she is. Thorn. Everyone knows." Julian stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. "Say one more word about her, and I won't settle for just having you escorted out. I'll make sure you never work in retail again. I'll tie you up in lawsuits for the next 5 years. Test me." Trevor backed up, hands raised, and stumbled away toward the parking lot. Julian turned to find Maya. She was gone. He scanned the park and spotted her near the parking lot, Chloe's hand in hers, walking fast, fleeing. Maya. He ran after her, catching up just as she reached the silver SUV. Maya, wait. She spun to face him, and her eyes were devastated. Don't. He's gone. He won't. It doesn't matter. Her voice cracked. He's gone, but they're all still thinking it. Every single person at that picnic is wondering if I'm sleeping with you. If that's why you hired me, why you gave me the car, why you're so good with my daughter. Tears were streaming down her face now. And you can't fire your way out of that, Julian. You can't make them unsee what they think they see. Chloe was watching them with worried eyes, clinging to her mother's leg. Julian felt his world crumbling. Maya, I'll make a statement. I'll tell everyone. Tell them what? That you hired me because I was kind to you? That you give me special treatment because you value my honesty? She laughed bitterly. That'll really convince them. Then what do you want me to do? The desperation in his voice surprised even him. Maya reached into her purse and pulled out the key fob for the SUV. She held it out to him, her hand shaking. I want you to understand that I can't live in your world. I thought I could. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I proved myself enough, people would see me as your equal. But they never will. You are my equal. Not to them. To them, I'm just another secretary who slept her way to the top. And my daughter... Her voice broke completely. My daughter just heard that man imply her mother is a whore. She doesn't understand it yet, but she will. And I won't let her grow up thinking that's how women succeed. She pressed the keys into his hand. You hired me to find the truth, Julian. Here it is. I can't stay. Not if it means Chloe grows up watching me be degraded. Not if it means I can never be sure if I earned my place, or if I'm just another assistant you wanted to sleep with. Maya, please. I'm sorry. She was backing toward the subway entrance now, pulling Chloe with her. I'm so sorry. But I can't do this anymore. She turned and walked away, and Julian stood in the parking lot with the key fob in his hand, surrounded by employees pretending not to watch, and felt the most important thing in his life slip through his fingers. The subway ride home was a blur of tears and Chloe's worried questions and the nauseating certainty that she'd just made the right decision for all the wrong reasons, or the wrong decision for all the right reasons. She didn't know anymore. By the time they got back to the apartment, Maya was hollowed out, running on autopilot. She made Chloe dinner, gave her a bath, read her 3 stories, and tucked her into bed with extra kisses. Is Julian mad at us? Chloe asked, her voice small. No, baby. He's not mad. Then why were you crying? Because sometimes the right thing and the good thing aren't the same. Because I'm in love with him, and that's the worst possible complication. Because his world will never see me as anything but a gold digger, and I can't live with that. Because I want you to grow up believing women are valued for their minds, not their bodies. Grown-up reasons, Maya said, smoothing Chloe's hair. Nothing for you to worry about. After Chloe fell asleep, Maya sat on the couch and stared at her phone. No messages from Julian, no calls, nothing. She'd burned the bridge, walked away from the best job she'd ever had, the most meaningful work, the partnership she'd been building. Walked away from $300,000 a year and the security it represented, walked away from him. Her phone buzzed. Her heart leaped. But it wasn't Julian. It was an email from HR. Subject, employment status. Maya's hands shook as she opened it. Dear Ms. Chen, per the terms of your employment contract, you are eligible for full severance upon resignation. 6 months salary plus benefits continuation. Additionally, the company vehicle has been transferred to your name as part of your exit package. Please contact Susan Park to arrange final paperwork. Thank you for your service to Thorn Enterprises. 6 months salary. The car. Benefits. Julian hadn't tried to stop her, hadn't fought her decision. He'd just let her go, given her the means to survive without him. Made sure she wouldn't be desperate, wouldn't have to come crawling back. Maya closed her laptop and curled up on the couch, hugging a pillow to her chest. She'd done the right thing. She'd protected her daughter. She'd walked away with her dignity intact. So why did it feel like she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life? Julian sat alone in his penthouse and tried to remember what his life had been like before Maya Chen. Sterile, successful, empty. He'd gone undercover looking for his company's heart and found it in a woman who'd been willing to lose everything for a stranger. He'd hired her to be his conscience, and she'd become something infinitely more precious. She'd become his hope that he could be better than the cold, calculating CEO everyone expected him to be. And he'd lost her because his world was too toxic, too cynical, too broken to let her exist in it without destroying her. His phone rang. Susan from HR. She got the severance email, Susan said. Julian, are you sure about this? That's a lot of money. Pay it, all of it, and transfer the car title to her name. You're essentially giving her $200,000 in cash and a $40,000 vehicle. She earned it, Julian said flatly. She did more in 2 months to fix this company's culture than anyone else has in 5 years. Pay it. A pause. You're in love with her. That's not relevant. Julian, pay the severance, Susan, and make sure she knows she can call me for a reference anytime. For anything. He hung up and poured himself a drink he wouldn't finish. Tomorrow he'd go back to work, back to board meetings and quarterly reports and the cold, efficient business of running an empire. He'd find another assistant, someone professional and distant and utterly replaceable. He'd bury himself in work until he forgot what Maya's laugh sounded like, until he forgot the way Chloe's hand had felt in his, until he forgot what a real home felt like. He'd go back to being the man he'd been before her. The thought made him feel dead inside. But that was fine. He'd been dead inside for years before Maya. He could do it again. He just hadn't realized how much it would hurt to remember what being alive felt like first. 3 weeks. Maya had been unemployed for 3 weeks, and this time felt completely different. She had money. The severance had hit her account, a number so large she'd stared at it for 10 minutes, convinced it was a mistake. She had the SUV, title in her name, paid off. She had health insurance for 6 months. She had security. And she was miserable. Chloe asked about Julian every day. When is he coming over again? Can we go visit him? Does he still remember my rock collection? Maya had no answers. Just deflections and distractions and the growing certainty that she'd broken her daughter's heart along with her own. The job offers had started coming in within a week. Word had spread, quietly, through professional networks, that Maya Chen had worked directly for Julian Thorn. The recommendations were glowing. The opportunities were significant. VP of Human Resources at a tech startup, Director of Employee Relations at a nonprofit, Chief Culture Officer at a retail chain. Good jobs, important work. Nothing that made her pulse race the way rebuilding Thorn Enterprises from the inside had. Nothing that felt like it mattered the way working beside Julian had mattered. It was a Saturday morning. Maya was making pancakes, Chloe's favorite, when someone knocked on the door. Not the buzzer from downstairs. Someone had gotten into the building and climbed 3 flights of stairs to knock directly on her door. Maya glanced through the peephole and her heart stopped. Julian. He looked terrible. His hair was disheveled, like he'd been running his hands through it for hours. He needed a shave. His clothes, jeans and a worn sweater, looked like he'd slept in them. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept since she'd left. Maya's hands shook as she unlocked the 3 locks. She opened the door, and they stared at each other for a long moment. "Hi," Julian said, his voice rough. "Hi. Can we talk, please?" Maya glanced back at the apartment. Chloe was watching cartoons, momentarily distracted. Mrs. Prey and Mrs. Rodriguez was coming by in an hour to take her to the park. "The hallway," Maya said, stepping out and pulling the door mostly closed behind her. "I don't want to confuse Chloe if you're just... I'm not just anything." Julian's intensity was immediate, overwhelming. "I'm here because I've spent 3 weeks trying to convince myself to move on, and I can't. I'm here because every decision I make, I want to run by you first. I'm here because my penthouse feels like a mausoleum, and I can't remember the last time I ate a real meal, and I haven't had a decent night's sleep since you left." Maya's breath caught. "Julian, I'm here to grovel," he continued, words spilling out like he'd been holding them back too long. "I went undercover looking for my company's heart, and I found it in you. But I was such a coward, Maya. I thought the power was in the disguise, in the test, in proving I could see the truth. But the real power was in you seeing me without any of the armor. You saw the man I could be, instead of the CEO I've been pretending to be for so long I forgot there was a difference." He ran a hand through his already messy hair, making it worse. "I don't want an assistant. I don't want an employee. I don't want someone who tells me what I want to hear or performs for my money or sees Julian Thorne, billionaire, instead of just me." "Then what do you want?" Maya whispered. "You." The word was raw, honest, devastating. "I want a partner. I want someone who challenges me and calls me out and makes me better. I want to push Chloe on the swings and listen to her explain dinosaurs and have dinner in your tiny apartment where people actually talk to each other. I want..." His voice cracked. "I want a family. I want to come home to something real instead of that sterile box I've been living in. I want you, Maya. Not as my assistant, as my equal, as my partner, as... God, I'm doing this all wrong." He stopped, took a breath, and looked at her with eyes that held everything he wasn't saying. "I love you," he said simply. "I'm in love with you, with your strength and your principles, and the way you love your daughter, and the way you made me feel like a person instead of a bank account. And I know I don't deserve you. I know I manipulated you and cost you your job and put you in an impossible position. I know my world is toxic and people will always assume the worst, and I can't promise to fix that." He stepped closer, and Maya's back hit the wall. "But I can promise to stand beside you when they talk. I can promise to make sure everyone knows you're not my assistant, you're my partner. I can promise to build a life with you where Chloe never has to wonder if her mother is valued for her mind or just seen as arm candy. I can promise to spend every day proving that you didn't make a mistake by giving me a chance." Maya was crying. Silent tears streaming down her face, her hands pressed to her mouth, her eyes devastated and hopeful and terrified all at once. Julian had rehearsed this speech for 3 weeks. Had practiced 100 different versions in his empty penthouse, while Marcus drove him past her building at midnight because he couldn't stay away. Had deleted and rewritten text messages until his phone felt like an accusation. Now, standing in her narrow hallway with cooking smells drifting from other apartments and the distant sound of a television playing, and Maya looking at him like he'd just offered her everything and nothing all at once. He knew he'd barely scratched the surface of what he needed to say. "I fired 17 managers in the last 3 weeks," he said quietly. "Every single one who had complaints filed against them that HR had buried. I restructured our entire corporate hierarchy to create independent oversight. I implemented anonymous reporting channels and mandatory bias training and..." "Julian." Maya's voice stopped him. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you started that. You showed me the rot and I'm cutting it out. but I can't do it alone. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hands in his. I need you, Maya. Not because I'm helpless without you. Not because you're the only one who can do the work. But because you make me want to be better. Because when I make decisions, I hear your voice in my head asking if they're right, not just if they're profitable. Her fingers curled around his, holding tight. The company needs restructuring, he continued. I need someone with your integrity to head employee relations. VP level, full C-suite access, independent budget, and the authority to override any manager, including me, if you see discrimination or harassment. Not as my assistant, as an executive in your own right. $600,000 a year, stock options, and a guarantee in writing that your position is protected regardless of our personal relationship. Maya's eyes widened. Julian, that's too much. It's not even close to enough. He pulled her closer until they were inches apart in the narrow hallway. But more than that, more than the job or the title or the money, I want you in my life. I want to be there when Chloe loses her next tooth. I want to have dinner at that rickety table where one leg is propped up with cardboard. I want to learn the difference between Jurassic and Cretaceous periods. I want to prove to you that I'm not the man who tested you in that store. I'm the man you saw past the disguise. The man who needed you to show him how to be human again. I never stopped seeing that man, Maya whispered. Even when I was angry, even when I walked away, I saw him. Then let me back in. His forehead touched hers, and he closed his eyes. Let me prove I'm worth the risk. Let me show Chloe that men can be good and relationships can be equal, and love doesn't mean losing yourself. Let me be your partner, Maya, in every way that matters. She'd built so many walls. Walls against need, against wanting, against the dangerous hope that someone could love her, not for what she could provide, but for who she was. Walls to protect Chloe from disappointment, from men who left, from the kind of instability that came from trusting the wrong person. And Julian, billionaire, manipulator, the man who'd cost her everything, was standing in her hallway asking her to let those walls crumble, asking her to trust him, to believe him, to choose him. You hurt me, Maya said, and felt him flinch. When you tested me, when you made me lose my job, you hurt me. And when you gave me the car, when you were good to Chloe, when you looked at me like I mattered, you scared me, because I wanted so badly to believe it was real, and I couldn't afford to be wrong. I know. His voice was rough with emotion. And if I could take back that test, I would. But I can't. All I can do is promise it will never happen again. Promise that I see you, Maya. Really see you. Not as someone I rescued or someone I employ, but as my equal. As the woman who saved me from becoming someone I'd hate. I didn't save you, she protested. Yes, you did. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. I was turning into my father, cold, isolated, measuring everything in profit margins and quarterly returns. I'd forgotten why the company mattered, why people mattered. You reminded me. Maya thought about the last 3 weeks. The job offers she'd turned down because they felt empty. The way Chloe had cried when Maya explained Julian probably wouldn't visit anymore. The nights she'd lain awake on the couch and replayed every conversation, every moment. Every time Julian had looked at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking his whole life. She thought about walking away from the picnic, and the relief mixed with devastation when he'd let her go. When he'd given her the severance and the car and the means to survive without him, not because he didn't care, but because he cared enough to want her to have a choice. Real power wasn't money or titles. Real power was choosing who you wanted to be and who you wanted to be with. from a place of strength instead of need. "I love you too," Maya said, and watched his expression transform. "I've been in love with you since you got down on your knees to talk to my daughter like she was a person instead of an inconvenience. Since you ate Mrs. Rodriguez's empanadas and looked at my tiny apartment like it was a palace. Since you saw my real life and didn't offer to rescue me from it, you just saw me." "Maya," his voice broke on her name. "But if we do this," she continued firmly, "it has to be real. Not boss and assistant. Not billionaire and single mother. Just two people who choose each other. Two people who are building something together. Partners," Julian said immediately. "In everything. I'll prove it to you, Maya. Every single day I'll prove it." She believed him. Maybe she was a fool. Maybe she'd regret it. Maybe his world would chew her up and spit her out anyway. But standing in her narrow hallway with Julian's hands holding hers and his eyes full of desperate hope and honest love, Maya made a choice. She chose to trust him. She rose up on her toes and kissed him. The world stopped. Maya's lips on his were soft and warm and tasted like hope and second chances. Julian's hands came up to cup her face, gentle and reverent, and he kissed her like she was precious. Like she was everything he'd been searching for without knowing what he was looking for. She kissed him back with a fierce intensity that made his knees weak, her hands fisting in his sweater, pulling him closer. It wasn't the desperate, heated kiss of pure lust. It was better. It was the kiss of two people who'd fought their way through every obstacle to get to this moment, who'd earned each other through honesty and pain and the courage to be vulnerable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against hers. "I'm going to do this right," he said. "I'm going to court you properly, take you on dates, meet your friends, let you meet mine, if I can find any who are actually worth introducing you to. I'm going to prove I'm in this for the long haul." "You already did," Maya said softly. "You came here looking like you haven't slept. You groveled in my hallway. The apartment door flew open. "Julian!" Chloe launched herself at him with the force of a small meteor. Julian caught her automatically, sweeping her up into his arms as she wrapped her arms around his neck in a stranglehold. "I missed you so much. Mommy said you were busy, but I knew you'd come back because you promised you'd see my rocks anytime, and you didn't see them in 3 weeks, and that's basically forever, and..." She pulled back, her eyes wide and worried. "Are you and Mommy friends again?" Julian looked at Maya over Chloe's head, saw the love and fear and hope in her eyes, and made a choice of his own. "Yes," he said firmly. "We're friends again. Better than friends. If your mom says it's okay, I'd like to be part of your family. Both of you." Chloe's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Like a dad?" The word hit Julian in the chest, unexpected and overwhelming and more right than anything he'd felt in years. "Would that be okay with you?" he asked carefully. "Yes." Chloe squeezed him tighter. "I always wanted a dad, and Mommy said maybe someday, and I really, really, really hope someday is now, because you're the best and you know about dinosaurs, and you push me really high on the swings and..." "Chloe, baby, slow down." Maya was laughing and crying at the same time. "Julian and I need to figure some things out first, okay? But yes, he's going to be around more, a lot more." Chloe beamed and wriggled down from Julian's arms. "Can we go to the park, all 3 of us, like a real family?" Julian looked at Maya, saw the moment she decided to let go of the fear. "Yes," Maya said, "like a real family." 2 months later, Maya learned that falling in love when you were already in love was an entirely different experience. Julian courted her properly. He took her to dinner at restaurants where no one would take pictures. He came to the apartment for movie nights, where Chloe would fall asleep between them on the couch. He learned to braid hair, badly, and read bedtime stories with all the character voices. He showed up with dinosaur books and art supplies and his honest, complete attention. He proved, every single day, that he was choosing them. Maya had taken the VP position, but on her terms, independent office in a different building, her own team, and the explicit understanding that she reported to the board, not to Julian. She'd restructured the employee relations department from the ground up, implemented transparent reporting systems, and personally overseen the termination of every manager who'd created hostile work environments. The company was changing, slowly, but really. And people were starting to see her not as Julian's girlfriend or his assistant, but as the woman who'd revolutionized their entire corporate culture. Tonight, Chloe was having a sleepover at Mrs. Rodriguez's daughter's house. Her first sleepover ever, after weeks of careful planning. And Julian had asked Maya to dinner, not at a restaurant, at his penthouse. Maya stood in front of her closet, nerves making her hands shake. They'd kissed plenty of times over the past 2 months. Heated kisses that left them both breathless and aching. But they'd always pulled back, Julian respecting her boundary even when she could feel how badly he wanted more. Tonight felt different. Tonight felt like a choice she was ready to make. She chose the simple black dress, the one that made her feel beautiful without trying too hard. Did her makeup carefully, left her hair down the way Julian liked it. When she arrived at the penthouse, using her own key now, a small thing that meant everything, Julian was waiting. He'd cooked. Actually cooked, not ordered in. The small table by the window was set with candles and fresh flowers. Music played softly in the background, not classical or jazz, but the indie folk she'd mentioned liking months ago. "You cooked," Maya said, stunned. "I've been taking lessons." Julian looked nervous, endearingly so. "It's probably terrible, but I wanted this to be real. Something I made for you, not something I bought." He'd made pasta carbonara, slightly imperfect but delicious. And they ate by candlelight, talking about everything and nothing. About Chloe's upcoming school play and the new policies Maya was implementing, and Julian's plans to open a foundation focused on employee rights. About the future they were building together. After dinner, they stood by the windows, looking out at the glittering city. Julian's arms were around her waist, her back pressed against his chest, and Maya felt safe in a way she'd never felt before. "I have something for you," Julian said quietly. He pulled back, and Maya turned to see him holding a small velvet box. Her heart stopped. "This is not how I planned to do this," he said, opening the box to reveal a ring. Simple, elegant, a single diamond that caught the light and threw rainbows across the room. "I had a whole speech prepared, something romantic and perfect and worthy of you, Julian. But the truth is simpler than any speech." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Maya Chen, you walked into my life when I was lost, and you showed me the way home. Not to this penthouse or this company or this city. To myself. To the man I wanted to be. You saw past every disguise, every defense, every wall I'd built, and you loved me anyway." Tears were already streaming down Maya's face. "I want to spend my life proving I'm worthy of that love," Julian continued. "I want to be the man Chloe runs to when she's scared. I want to have a house full of dinosaur drawings and rock collections and sticky breakfast tables. I want to build something real with you, something that matters more than any empire or any fortune. I want—" His voice broke. "I want to be your husband, your partner, your equal, if you'll have me." "Yes." The word burst out of Maya before he'd even finished. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Julian's smile was incandescent. He slid the ring onto her finger with shaking hands, then pulled her into a kiss that felt like a promise, like a beginning, like coming home. When they broke apart, both laughing and crying, Maya looked at the ring on her finger. Not too big, not ostentatious, just perfect. "There's no prenup," Julian said quietly. "Everything I have, I'm giving you freely. Because I trust you, Maya. With my company, with my heart, with my life. You're not marrying my money. You're marrying me. And everything I have, I want to be ours. Together." Maya was looking at him with eyes full of love and desire and trust, and Julian felt like he could conquer the world. "Make love to me," she said softly. "Not as my boss or my fiancé or the billionaire, just as Julian, just as the man I love." "Are you sure?" He needed to hear it, needed to know this was what she wanted. "I've never been more sure of anything." She took his hand and led him toward the bedroom, the room he'd barely used in months. Too used to falling asleep on the couch to her voice on the phone, to their long conversations that stretched past midnight. The bedroom was simple, sparse. He'd never brought anyone here. This was his private space, and he'd been waiting, though he hadn't known it, for her. Maya turned to face him, and her fingers went to the zipper of her dress. "I need you to know something first. Anything. I'm not doing this because you proposed, or because of the ring, or because of what you can give me. I'm doing this because I choose you, because I want you, because I trust you with all of me, my heart, my body, my future, all of it." Julian's throat was tight with emotion. "I know, and I'm going to spend my life being worthy of that trust." She let the dress fall. They came together slowly, reverently, like they had all the time in the world. Julian's hands were gentle as they traced her, learning every curve and hollow, every place that made her gasp. His kisses were tender and deep, tasting of love and promise. He whispered her name like a prayer, told her she was beautiful, perfect, everything he'd ever wanted, wrapped in his arms. Maya felt a sense of wholeness she'd never known before. This wasn't just physical closeness. Thought, it was that too. Intense and overwhelming and perfect. This was two souls recognizing each other, two broken people becoming whole together. "I love you," Julian said against her lips, every breath a vow. "I love you, I love you, I love you." "I love you too," Maya gasped, her hands in his hair, her body melting into his. So much. Always. The world narrowed to shared heartbeat and breath until the moment crested over them, leaving them both trembling and breathless. They collapsed together in a tangle of limbs and racing hearts. Julian pulled her close, wrapping her in his arms, and Maya felt tears slip down her cheeks. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming rightness of it all. "You okay?" Julian's voice was worried. "Perfect." She turned in his arms to face him. "I'm perfect. This is perfect. We're perfect." He kissed her forehead, her eyelids, her tear-stained cheeks. "I'm going to make you happy. Every day, for the rest of our lives. I'm going to make you happy." "You already do," Maya said, "just by being you, just by choosing us." They lay there for a long time, wrapped in each other, and Maya thought about how far they'd come. From a test in a department store to this, to love, to partnership, to a future full of possibility. She'd been fired for a single act of kindness, and somehow, impossibly, it had led her here. To home. 1 year later, the grand reopening of the Fifth Avenue Luminaire was nothing like the sterile, status-obsessed store it had been. The changes were everywhere. The employee lounge with comfortable seating and free meals, the on-site childcare center, the transparent pay scales posted in the break room, the diversity in management that actually reflected the city around them. But the biggest change was invisible. It was in the way employees smiled at each other, the way they treated customers with genuine warmth instead of calculated servility, the way they weren't afraid to speak up when something was wrong. Maya stood on the main floor in her elegant navy suit, Vera Wang, but she'd bought it herself with her own salary, and watched people stream through the doors. Press, employees, customers, curiosity seekers. Her left hand rested on the small swell of her stomach, 4 months along, finally starting to show. The baby kicked gently, as if celebrating along with them. Nervous? Julian appeared beside her, devastatingly handsome in his charcoal suit, his hand immediately going to the small of her back. The simple gold wedding band on his finger caught the light. A little, Maya admitted. This is where it all started. This is where we started, Julian corrected. He turned her to face him, his eyes warm. 1 year ago, I walked into this store in disguise, and the best thing in my life happened. You saw a stranger being mistreated, and you risked everything to help him. I had no idea that stranger was going to completely upend my life. In a good way, I hope. Maya looked at her husband, still such a miraculous word, and felt her heart swell. In the best way. Chloe appeared, tugging on Julian's sleeve with her usual boundless energy. At 7, she was all gap-toothed smiles and dinosaur facts, and the absolute certainty that her family was the best family in the whole world. Dad, Mom, they're about to start. She'd taken to calling Julian Dad 3 months ago, right around the wedding, and every time she said it, Julian's face lit up like she'd given him the world. Because she had. They both had. The 3 of them, soon to be 4, made their way to the small stage set up in the atrium. The same atrium where Maya had been fired, where her life had fallen apart and somehow, miraculously, come back together better than before. Julian stepped up to the microphone, and the crowd quieted. Thank you all for coming, he began. 1 year ago, this company needed to change. We'd lost sight of what matters. Not the bottom line or the shareholder value, but the people. The employees who show up every day and make this company run. The customers who trust us with their business. The communities we serve. He paused, his eyes finding Maya's. I went looking for what was wrong, and I found someone who showed me how to make it right. My wife, Maya Thorne, is the VP of Employee Relations and Culture at Thorne Enterprises. But more importantly, she's the conscience of this company. She's the reason we're standing here today in a store that values dignity over profit, that treats every employee with respect, that believes kindness isn't a weakness, it's a strength. The crowd applauded, and Maya felt herself blush. So today, as we reopen this flagship store with new policies, new leadership, and a new commitment to doing better, I want to say thank you to every employee who believed in this change, to every customer who held us accountable, and especially to my wife, who taught me that the real power isn't in money or titles. It's in choosing to do the right thing, even when it costs you everything. He held out his hand to Maya. She took it and stepped up beside him, Chloe between them holding both their hands. This is Maya Thorne, Julian said, his voice thick with emotion. The woman who was fired from this store for treating a stranger with kindness. The woman who rebuilt our entire corporate culture from the ground up. The woman who showed me what it means to lead with integrity instead of fear. He turned to look at her, and his eyes held everything they'd been through together. She saw past my disguise. She saw the man I could be, and she loved me enough to help me become him. The event was a triumph. Press coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Employees were genuinely excited. The new store policies were already being adopted by other retail chains. But Julian barely noticed any of it. He was watching Maya work the room, her hand resting protectively on her stomach, her smile genuine and warm as she talked to employees she'd personally hired, managers she'd trained, people whose lives she'd changed by simply believing they deserved better. Chloe was nearby, explaining the new employee childcare center to a reporter with the kind of passionate intensity she brought to everything. And there's a reading nook and a playground, and they have books about dinosaurs. And my mom made sure they had it because she says kids are important even when grown-ups are working. His daughter. His brilliant, beautiful, dinosaur-obsessed daughter who'd accepted him into her life with the wholehearted trust only children possessed. His wife. His partner. The woman who'd taken his empty life and filled it with love and purpose and sticky breakfast tables and rock collections and late-night conversations about making the world better. His family. The corporation was successful. More successful than ever, actually. Turns out treating employees well and creating inclusive cultures was good for business. Who knew? But his real legacy was here. In Maya's smile as she talked about the parental leave policy they'd implemented. In Chloe's excitement about the childcare center. In the baby growing inside Maya, a life they'd created together from love and choice, and the belief that they could build something better. Sir? Susan appeared at his elbow. The board is asking when you'll be available for the quarterly review. Tuesday, Julian said absently, still watching Maya. And Susan, can you clear my schedule next Friday? It's Chloe's school play. Of course. Susan smiled. You know, a year ago you would have said the board meeting was more important. A year ago I was an idiot. Susan laughed and walked away, and Julian made his way through the crowd to his wife. Maya saw him coming and lit up the way she always did. The way that made him feel like the richest man in the world, and not because of the billions in his bank account. Ready to go home? He asked, pulling her close. Almost. I want to... She stopped, her hand going to her stomach. Oh. What? What's wrong? Instant panic. Nothing's wrong. Her smile was radiant. The baby just kicked, really hard. Like they approve of all this. Julian's hand joined hers on her stomach, and he felt it. A tiny flutter, their child moving inside her. They have good taste, he said, his voice rough with emotion. Chloe appeared, wedging herself between them. Is the baby kicking? Can I feel? Of course, baby. Maya guided Chloe's hand to the right spot, and they stood there, the three of them, soon to be four, in the middle of the crowded store, feeling the promise of their future moving beneath Maya's hand. They drove home together in the SUV. Maya still insisted on driving it herself, said it reminded her of where she'd come from and how far she'd traveled. Home wasn't the penthouse anymore. They'd bought a house in Brooklyn, nothing ostentatious. Just a beautiful brownstone with a yard for Chloe and enough bedrooms for a growing family and a neighborhood full of actual neighbors who didn't care about net worth, just about community. Mrs. Rodriguez had moved into the guest house out back. She was the baby's honorary grandmother, and nothing would change that. Julian carried a sleeping Chloe inside. She'd crashed hard after all the excitement, and tucked her into her bed with its glow-in-the-dark stars and its shelves full of dinosaur books and rock specimens. Then he found Maya in the kitchen, making tea, staring out the window at their small, perfect garden. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her stomach. Happy? He asked, deliriously. She leaned back against him. You? More than I ever thought possible. They stood like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other in the quiet peace of their home. Do you ever think about that day? Maya asked softly. The day I got fired? Every day. Do you regret it? Julian turned her to face him. I regret that it hurt you. I regret that my test cost you so much pain. but I can't regret what it led to. Can't regret finding you. I used to be so angry, Maya admitted. About the test, about losing my job, about feeling manipulated. But now, she touched his face, her eyes soft. Now I see it differently. You weren't testing me to see if I'd fail. You were testing yourself to see if anyone would pass. You were looking for hope in a cynical world. And somehow, we found each other. You found me, Julian corrected. I was lost, and you showed me the way home. We found each other, Maya insisted. Two broken people who became whole together. Julian kissed her, soft, sweet, full of promise. I love you, Maya Thorne. I love you too, Julian Thorne. From upstairs came Chloe's sleepy voice. I love you both. Now be quiet so I can sleep. They laughed, and Maya called back, love you too, baby. Julian looked at his wife, at the home they'd built, at the future stretching out before them full of possibility and promise and love. He'd gone undercover looking for his company's heart. He'd found his own instead. And it beat, now and always, in time with Maya's. 5 years later, the article in Forbes was titled, The Thorne Revolution, How One Couple Changed Corporate Culture. It featured a picture of Julian and Maya at their standing desks in their shared home office. Yes, they work together now, true partners in every sense. Maya's company, Ethical Culture Consulting, worked alongside Thorne Enterprises to help other corporations rebuild their cultures from the ground up. Chloe, now 12 and still obsessed with dinosaurs, had her own column in the article about growing up with parents who believed in doing the right thing. My mom always says that the most revolutionary thing you can do is be kind when it costs you something, she was quoted saying. My dad says that real power is using your privilege to lift others up. I say they're both right, and also they're totally embarrassing at school pickup. But I love them anyway. The baby from Maya's pregnancy, Nina, now 4, had a quote too, though it was mostly about wanting a pet dinosaur. The article detailed the transformation of Thorne Enterprises from a typical corporate monolith to a model of ethical business practices. The numbers were impressive. Employee retention up 73%, productivity up 45%, customer satisfaction at an all-time high, and profits, despite the cynic's predictions, had actually increased. But the real story wasn't in the numbers. It was in the hundreds of employees who'd shared their stories of working for a company that valued them. The single mothers who could afford childcare because of on-site services. The employees of color who'd risen to leadership positions because hiring was finally equitable. The culture of dignity that had spread from one store to one company to an entire industry. At the end of the article, the journalist had asked Maya what she wanted people to know. Her answer was simple. She was fired for seeing the man behind the disguise. He hired her back for life. And together, they proved that you don't have to choose between profit and principles. You can build something better, something that matters, something real. Julian's answer was even simpler. He went undercover to find his company's heart and found his own instead. Best decision he ever made was getting caught. The article ended with a photo of their family, Julian and Maya, Chloe and Nina, standing in front of the 5th Avenue Luminaire on the 5th anniversary of its reopening. They were laughing. They were whole. They were home. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope you enjoyed the journey. If you did, please subscribe and leave a comment. I love getting to know you better. And be on the lookout for our next story of strength, perseverance, and love. It should be on your feed very soon.